You had asked a minute ago, like if somebody's struggling, like what do people struggle with in their relationships, or when they come to see me, what do they struggle with? And I truly believe it's that idea of being authentic. And we talked about this a while ago. Gabor Mate has a lot of studies in authenticity and attachment. But if somebody doesn't know who they are, it's really hard for them to be authentic, right? And so if somebody wants to understand who they are, they have to understand where they've come from. And that's not easy because a lot of people have gone through a lot in their past. And it is really difficult for them to go back there and look at those things. But it's really necessary. I really want to understand how I was historically conditioned. I really want to understand why I'm meeting this moment the way I'm meeting it. And the best way for me to understand myself and to have a relationship with myself is to go back and see what I went through, how I responded to it, and how I continue to respond in present day. And if people can do that, they will start having a better relationship with themselves. If I can actually look at myself objectively and not judge myself, right? Not talk down to myself, but just really look at myself objectively and say, wow, I did that back then and I'm doing it now. Isn't that interesting? Do I want to continue to do it that way, or do I want to change? People can become very self-aware very quickly. But what happens? They judge themselves. That's what we do. We just keep judging and judging and judging. And that's a recipe for disaster. If we look at this idea of observation and being an observer, and you can look at, Eckhart Tolle, you can look at Michael Singer, a lot of people that are in the more spiritual community in the West that are adopting Eastern spiritual philosophies like Buddhism and Hinduism. There's this idea that there's an ego and then there's an observer, right? The ego is Sean Rollinson, the therapist, the father, the guy who looks like a hippie that's tattooed all over, that's 53 years old, that lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. That's my ego, right? The one that I identify with. The observer, or my conscious awareness, Christians call it the soul, Eastern philosophy calls it your conscious awareness, is that part of me that can observe myself doing things. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So like I can tell that I'm sitting here in this chair right now. Well, which one am I? Am I the observer or am I the person sitting in the chair? Well, I kind of think I'm both, right? But if I can make that separation, that I'm able to observe my own behaviors, that's the first part. If you want to start with getting a better understanding of who you are, right? If you want to become intimate with yourself, the word intimacy, and I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about emotional intimacy. The word intimacy broken down is into me I see. Okay. And if I want to be intimate with somebody, I want to have emotional intimacy, I want to be able to share my internal world with them externally. Well, if I don't know what the hell that means or how to do that, it's really difficult. So I'm going to kind of break down 3 different things that you can do to start with that. If we look at cognitive behavioral therapy from Aaron Beck, cognitive behavioral therapy is, in a very broad sense, is my thoughts create my emotions create my behaviors. So what cognitive behavioral therapy says is that my thoughts are going to influence my emotions. My emotions are dependent on my thoughts. I think that that's fairly accurate for humans, but maybe not completely accurate all the time. I also believe our behaviors can influence our emotions. Let's talk about being mindful. Okay, this is just a practice in mindfulness. If I want to start understanding my thoughts, well, first I have to recognize what is a thought. Well, first a thought's automatic. And people are like, no, my thoughts aren't automatic. I'm like, your thoughts are absolutely automatic. I don't think about what I'm about to say to you right now. It's just coming out, right? It's automatic. If I see somebody that makes me feel a little bit strange, I don't think about having a thought about that. I just say, wow, that person makes me feel strange. It's an automatic thought. I have to be understanding or at least accepting that my thoughts are automatic. And then I have to say, okay, how do I observe an automatic thought? That's a hard thing to do, observing an automatic thought. Well, meditation is a great way to do that. So, an easy practice that somebody can do is sit down for just a couple minutes and close their eyes and just focus on their breath. Just focus on breathing in and breathing out, breathing in and breathing out, and just pay attention to that sensation of breath. Now, what's going to happen 100% of the time when you first start doing this is your thoughts are going to come in. Man, this is a stupid exercise. Boy, I can really feel the breath in my throat, or what's for dinner tomorrow? There's always going to be a thought. When the thought comes in, look at it for a second, and then see yourself dropping it on the floor, and then return back to your breath. And then you'll breathe a couple more times. All of a sudden, another thought will come in. What I want you to do is look at it, see it, and then drop it on the floor. Don't grab a hold of it and let it take you somewhere. Just notice you're having the thought, drop it on the floor, and return back to your breath. The first several times you do this, you're not going to see any results. Just like going to the gym, just like eating healthy, you don't see any results for quite a long time until you continue the behavior. But if you can practice this 2 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day, over the course of a couple months, you'll be up to like 20 minutes a day, focusing on your breath and noticing your thoughts. You're starting to train that observer part of you, that conscious awareness part of you, that is more interested in what's happening internally than externally, right? Our consciousness tends to look at what's going on outside of me all the time. Well, what this practice does is it slows that down, and we start looking what's going on internally. And the more we do that, the more we become aware of, wow, my thoughts are automatic. I want to start with thoughts. Like, we want to get to the place where you can observe behavior, where you can observe emotions and behaviors. That's hard, just trying to observe your emotions. And people are like, well, why is that so hard? Well, you're not only trying to observe what you're feeling, you're also feeling what you're feeling. And that's an energy in your body that a lot of times, if you're looking at rage or anger or shame or fear or pain, a lot of those emotions are overwhelming. It's really hard for me to be mindful and sit in a very zen state of mind when I'm just feeling overwhelmed with the energy in my body. So what we want to do before we start observing the emotions, we want to learn how to decrease that energy, right? So first, I want to start with paying attention to my thoughts and recognizing that they're automatic and I probably don't have control over them a lot of the time. I then want to recognize that my thoughts influence my emotions. Many of us, our thoughts dictate our emotions. There's no influencing at all. It's just, I have a thought, I have an emotion, have a thought, I have an emotion. You get to a place where you don't always trust your thoughts. You don't always believe your thoughts. I love this idea of my first thought is typically the wrong thought. And I just say, nah, let me hold off on that one and maybe think something else. So if we can get to a place where we can observe our emotions, then we're at a place where our emotional intelligence is starting to get a lot higher on the EQ scale. I tend to feel my fear in my stomach. Most people do. And that can be a very overwhelming sensation to where all I'm dealing with is focusing on that sensation in my body. So I need to first find a way to dissipate that emotion, dissipate that energy. And we've talked about this, exercising, talking to somebody, meditating, journaling, going on a walk, going on a run, hitting a punching bag. Any of those things can take that energy that's inside of you and move it outward. Once the energy is low enough to where I'm not being controlled by that energy, then I'm able to look at it. Now, what does that mean? This is a fun exercise I do with my clients. I have them close their eyes and I have them say, okay, I want you to pay attention to what your body feels like right now. Tell me what you're feeling. I'm feeling scared. Okay, great. Where do you feel that energy in your body? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, in my stomach area, my solar plexus. I'm like, fantastic. What I want you to do is I want you to characterize this energy. I want you to make it look like something. A lot of times I'll have them draw this. So I'll say, first off, just tell me what color is that energy. And they'll say, oh, it's red. Okay. You have a red energy in your chest area, in your stomach area, yes. What is the texture of that red energy? And they'll say, oh, it's spiky. Great. What movement, what motion is that energy? Oh, it's swirling. Okay, now we're starting to see something. We can actually visualize it, right? We're using our imagination, but our imagination is very powerful. Probably the reason I'm feeling afraid is because of my imagination, right? The worst thing happening. Well, I can use my imagination to calm that down too. So now I recognize I've got this red ball, spiky energy moving in my chest. Then the last question I ask is, if that energy could speak, what is it trying to tell you?
Hmm.
Most of the time, people are like, I have no idea. That's okay. Feel it. It'll tell you. Sit with it and feel it. What's it trying to tell you? Well, it's trying to tell me that this fear's coming and I'm probably not in a healthy relationship and I need to get out. Great. No, you don't have to get out. I'm just saying that's what that energy is telling you. That behavior right there, now you've raised your EQ. You're a little bit more emotionally intelligent. You're slowing this down, which tends to happen within just a millisecond. You're slowing it down to where you can understand it. The more you do that, the more you can understand what you're experiencing and be able to articulate it. Now your emotions are not something that are a nuisance, but they're something that are going to be able to teach you, guide you. I believe that emotions are guideposts. If we pay attention to what the emotion, get a little weird here, but I believe my emotions are coming from a higher place, not just within me, but there's something else there that's saying, hey, you're either in alignment with what you're supposed to be or you're in disalignment with what you're supposed to be. And if we listen to that and we're authentic, right? We talked about how do you know how to trust yourself, or how do you know who you are? You know who you are when you can actually feel something and be like, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what it's telling me. So we get into that behavior enough. We can pay attention to our thoughts. Okay. Now we can pay attention to our feelings. Okay. Just those two, you can start changing the way you feel a lot of the time. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes my thought and my feeling are pretty in alignment, right? I have a big presentation to do. There's 100,000 people in the auditorium. I'm feeling anxious. I'm worried that this isn't going to go well. That's a normal reaction, right? Well, maybe I should get a behavior involved now to calm down that emotion, right? So behaviors are huge. People use behaviors to mask emotions. People use behaviors to numb out emotions. People use behaviors to disassociate from emotions. You look at addiction, you look at raging, you look at manipulative behaviors, all sorts of things that happen with our behaviors that influence our emotions.
That first step to ending the numbing pattern and starting the feeling pattern is just to take that first step of decreasing the energy or meditating or
Yeah, but you have to know you have to have a behavior that works. You have to have a skill that works. So we used to call them coping mechanisms, right? Coping skills. I like to call them emotional self-regulation skills. What are a couple things? I just need 2 or 3 things that I know that if I do, it will decrease my emotions. Now, drinking and drugs will decrease your emotions. There's no doubt about that. Temporarily. The next day, however, the emotions tend to be tenfold, right? Or there's a new emotion there. There's a new energy there. I find, again, exercise is probably the most healthy way to decrease that energy of those emotions. Sitting with your emotions, though, isn't going to kill you. Sitting there and being angry, and just be angry. Don't do anything with it. If you have to punch a pillow or scream into a pillow, that's fine, but don't take it out on somebody else. It will pass through you. So if I'm having a hard time with an emotion that I can't get rid of, change a behavior, and you might actually see some movement that way too.